WNBF.
The following program is paid for by the No Frack Almanac. Opinions expressed during the program are those of the show host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs of Town Square Media or News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton.
You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody, but if you do right by God, He'll lead you to the sea where rivers flow.
Hi, everybody, it's me, Nobody, and welcome to the July 13th, 2014 edition of The Nobody Show, your unabashed voice of waiting for the drone strike radio. The topic of The Nobody Show these days, it's not always that, but this edition of The Nobody Show, it's an anti-fracking show now. And we're talking about fracking. This is the third in a series. In the first show, I talked about how fracking is tyranny. In the second show, I pointed out that contrary to the claims of the shills for the gas companies, there is no regulatory scheme for fracking, neither in theory nor in practice. And so when they tell you that they're going to regulate it, they're basically just lying to you because it's easy to prove that that's not going to happen. So this is what I want to do in this third show. I know you may not have heard the first two shows, but I think of this as a kind of series, and the first two shows are archived at nofrackalmanac.com. But in this third show, I have a question. What is going to come of fracking? Someday, fracking is going to stop. That nobody can disagree with. It's either going to stop because they've fracked everything and it's been so wonderful and we're sorry to see it end, or it's going to stop because we put a stop to it because it's so awful. But some way or the other, it's going to stop. We know that. So my question is, where are we going to be when fracking stops? What is going to be the situation? What is America going to look like? What will be left when fracking stops? And the number to call in here at WNBF to voice your opinion on this is 607-772-1290, 607-772-1290. So what is going to happen? I will start this off by saying that we are, in my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, but in my opinion, my humble opinion, we are in a situation where what's thinkable isn't true, and what's true is unthinkable. That's the situation, unfortunately, in my opinion, with fracking and a lot of things in our society, which should not be happening. I call this waiting for the drone strike radio because the President of the United States now claims he has the authority to smoke people who are American citizens without trial. Well, he just says he's got that right to do it. This is something I never thought I'd ever see in my life in the United States of America. People on the right and the left should be absolutely outraged and flabbergasted that this has happened in our country. But that's the way it is. It's true. The president does claim that power and has ordered the killing of American citizens without trial. I consider it unthinkable, but it's true. So, okay, what's thinkable that isn't true is this wonderful future we're going to have with fracking. That's thinkable, but it isn't true. Again, those numbers to call in here are 772-1290, and I'm asking, what's going to be the end of fracking? Where are we going to be? The industry would tell you that we're going to have this wonderful future. We're going to have prosperity, jobs, no foreign wars. You know, one of the ironies of this claim that having fracked gas in America is going to mean we won't have foreign wars, one of the ironies of that is that when we had a surplus of oil, when we were the ones who had it, We started the biggest war we were ever in. I'm not blaming us, by the way, but one of the proximate causes. It wasn't. I'm not saying it was our fault. I shouldn't say we started it in that sense, but one thing led to another, and the spark that led to Pearl Harbor was our embargo of oil to the Japanese. So it's amazing to me that now the American people are being sold this idea that if we have the surplus, it means, oh, there'll be no more foreign wars, when the worst foreign war we ever got into came when we had a surplus. But never mind that point. The industry is telling us that we'll have prosperity and jobs, energy independence, and it'll be clean energy for 100 years, even though there's nothing that would substantiate that. But let's not quibble. And it's going to reduce emissions. This is a wonderful future. And frankly, I don't know why they don't throw in that it's a cure for acne and it will make us all thin. Because if you listen to the industry, everything is going to be wonderful. But is that really the future that awaits us with fracking? Is that really what's going to happen? Well, I can tell you there are two reasons why you can be absolutely sure that that's not going to happen. That number to call in again here is 607-772-1290. Okay, here's the first reason. And the first reason is that I suppose there is an exception to the rule somebody could cite. But as a rule, no product ever is what the manufacturers hype it as. If you want to talk about conveniences, things that, we all believe in even or use, the automobile, for instance, when it was introduced, they weren't talking about 30 or 40,000 dead on the highways every year. Nobody mentioned that. It has its drawbacks. Every time they introduce a new pill, you see the ads for the pill, and then about 2 or 3 years later, you see the ads from the lawyers saying, did you take this pill? Because now we can sue for all of the bad effects that it had. Of course, you all remember claims like the Titanic would never sink and nuclear power would be too cheap to meter. As a general rule, products never live up to the hype. It could happen, but if you're somebody who listens to the hype that is paid for by the manufacturer, what am I going to tell you? You might be somebody who believes some toothpaste is going to help your love life. I can't really say much to that, but the fact is that usually the advertising claims are false, and it's bizarre that we have everybody in the news media, some up to the President of the United States, parroting what's in the advertisements by the industry, as if that's always a source of truth. Can't listen to those hysterical environmentalists and those people who are but advertising, that's always true. It's bizarre. So that's number one reason. But number two reason is it's already not happening. It's already been disproven. And let me explain to you why, because, we concentrate on some of the smaller points. But as terms of what this really all portends, there's some bigger points too. If you take the industry's claims at face value, what are they saying? What are they saying? They're basically saying, if we may use an old saying in America, which has a kind of common sense truth to it, and that people believe. I believe this in many times. It doesn't always work, but it's a kind of folk wisdom, which is, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door. This is the best thing about capitalism. We all can criticize capitalism, but let's not forget there are some good points. And the absolute best is that you can be an innovator, you can invent something, you can bring something to the world that wasn't there before, and we all believe in our hearts that if you do it, the world, if you build it, they will come. That's the dream. Sometimes that doesn't really happen. You have a better product and it's not recognized, but let's not get into the details here. Again, 607-772-1290, 607-772-1290 is the number to call in. So, when they have that common sense folk wisdom, which we all tend to believe, if you build a better mousetrap, the world will beat a path to your door, that's already not happening with fracking. The world is trying to keep it away. And the latest to do so is the nation of Germany. The nation of Germany has now announced that it's going to have a 7-year moratorium on fracking. This goes by with the same thing with their neighbor, France, which also has banned fracking. You know, I have to tell you, as much as I criticize the government of the United States and the powers that be in the United States, I have to say that we, the American people, bear some responsibility for the mess we're into. Because when these things happen, we should be paying attention to them. And instead, this country, or there's something, it's amazing to me with what ease it can be dismissed and people swallow it. If you remember, I'm a homeless advocate when I'm not doing this. And if you remember when the homelessness crisis started, if anybody remembers, Ronald Reagan got on the air and he said the reason that these people are on the streets is they don't know where the shelters are. Oh, there's plenty of shelters. It wasn't true. He also promised no one would fall through the safety net, but people did. Well, his policy is not different from substantially, I mean, it's not a Republican or Democratic thing. We've had the homelessness crisis for 3 decades and more now. And, you know, during that time, you have a lot of one-sentence ways to, oh, those people, they're bums, they're drunks, they don't want to work, whatever it is. And it's so easy to dismiss things. So easy to dismiss things. So France and Germany don't want fracking, and instead of saying, oh my gosh, these are sovereign nations of highly intelligent people, millions of people making choices just like we have to make, instead of saying that, we say, oh, they're hysterical. Things that used to be said to, you know, when a woman would say something like she'd been raped, they'd say, see, she was hysterical. She was crazy. And with like a sentence or two, we can just dismiss the entire nation of France and Germany. This is from the Dow Jones Newswire. Germany plans to halt shale gas drilling for the next 7 years over concerns that exploration techniques could pollute groundwater. Quote, there won't be shale gas fracking in Germany for the foreseeable future, unquote, German Environment Minister Barbara Hendrick said Friday in Berlin. Quote, protecting drinking water and health has the highest value for us, unquote. Now, how come she's saying this is about protecting water and health, and the President of the United States is saying it's about 100 years of clean energy and let's get on with it? There is something here that ought to make every citizen of the United States say, how did the sovereign nations of France and Germany come to a different conclusion? I think Bulgaria's banned it too. That Romania, they have demonstrations against it. In Poland, they have demonstrations against it. They have demonstrations against it in the United States. This is not the better mousetrap, because in the saying, you know, build a better mousetrap and the world will beat about the door, nobody says, build a better mousetrap and the world will fight to keep you away. But that's what's happening with fracking. That's how you know it's not what they claim it is. And every day, more evidence appears to that effect. Every day. And so this is the real question. We can get into some of this evidence. But what is going to happen as people catch on? Are the oil and gas companies going to say, oh, we don't really care? Right? These are the same companies that are trying to buy up Congress, influence elections now since the Citizens United case, which people on the left and right both oppose. This idea that a corporation can pour any amount of money into our election, and they do take advantage of it, because money is speech, and the money of a corporation can have more influence on an election than the speech of a citizen, which of course is not right, but it's just one more of those things, like I said, in America today, and sometimes elsewhere, what's thinkable isn't true, and what's true is unthinkable. It's unthinkable that in our country the vote is being taken away from us and being given to corporations, which have literally no souls. The power of our democracy is being taken away from us. This is unthinkable. But that's what's happening. Let me take a little break here and acknowledge some of the wonderful people who are sponsoring this show. Well, give me a second. We are fortunate and blessed to have some wonderful outspoken advertisers, and I just read the ads, so let me read you some of these ads. This hour, let me tell you the number to call in again, 772-1290, 607-772-1290. This hour of the Nobody Show is brought to you by Themis and Thread, an independent online fashion brand committed to using 100% American-made components to create customizable styles. Named after the goddess of justice and with a symbol of happiness as its logo, Themis and Thread dreams of a healthy, non-toxic future for fashion. To learn more about Themis and Thread, and why fashion and fracking don't mix, just visit Themis and Thread online. That's Themis, Themis, and Thread. Justifiable fashions made in the USA. This portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by the Ithaca Bakery, working every day to sustainably provide some of the best food around while contributing positively to the local community. With an emphasis on locally produced goods, the Ithaca Bakery can satisfy any hunger, doing their part with 46 kilowatts of solar electric panels and vigorously composting and recycling. The Ithaca Bakery is the place to eat well and do good. Open 7 days a week at 400 North Meadow Street and the Trip Hammer Marketplace in Ithaca. And this portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by Rasta Ranch Vineyards on Route 414 in Hector, New York. We make our wine with the best traditional New York State grapes, nurtured with the pure waters of Seneca Lake, and we entertain our guests with music, including Sunday sessions and Monday night blues. At Rasta Ranch, dogs, mothers, and hippies are always welcome, but frack rigs aren't. That's Rasta Ranch, 5882 Route 414 in Hector. All right, we'll get to some more advertisements later, but let's talk now about why this is going to go wrong. Why this has to go wrong. And what is the state of whatever state they've got it in the state in the sense of the United States. What are they going to do as it goes wrong? They got this problem now in Iraq. What's going to go wrong? Everything is going wrong in Iraq. And you say, well, what are you going to do? It's not like nobody could have seen it coming. Well, we can see things now going wrong with fracking. But what? What's going to drive these issues? Well, let me read you something here. This is from Mint Press, June 16th of this year. Oil and gas companies used more than 45 million pounds, or 22,500 tons, of dangerous chemicals throughout the last year in 477 hydraulic fracturing, acidizing, and gravel packing operations in Los Angeles and Orange counties, according to a recently released report from the Center for Biological Diversity and 3 other environmental and health groups. The report specified that more than 44 different air toxic chemicals, or chemicals that are released into the air, were used over 5,000 times since last June. Well, you know, the people in Southern California are a tad sensitive about what happens to their air. They well understand that as things go wrong with the air, it means death. Without putting any sugar coating on it, it means children with asthma will die, old people with respiratory problems will die. It increases the death rate. It's not like you do that and like people over in the Figueroa neighborhood or something, they just all drop dead. But it increases the mortality rate. That's well documented. There isn't any possible dissent about that. Nobody could disagree with that. Well, do you think that they're going to object to that? Do you think that that's something that the people in Los Angeles are going to say sooner or later, and probably sooner because they're having a lot of demonstrations now in California about fracking? No, also the earthquake problem, all of that. Well, do you think people are going to not like it? And there'll be protest. Here's something else. Listen, this is from USA Today, January 5th, 2014. In at least 4 states that have nurtured the nation's energy boom, hundreds of complaints have been made about well water contamination from oil or gas drilling, and pollution was confirmed in a number of them, according to a review that casts doubt on industry suggestions that such problems rarely happen. The evidence is coming in of water contamination, something that they said couldn't happen. But it is. Here's a report. I mean, there are so many, and this is a minor one. This is from July 7th. From the Washington, PA, Observer reporter, Dateline Pittsburgh. State environmental regulators said a leak at the John Day impoundment contaminated groundwater with chloride as crews removed nearly 12,000 tons of soil from the Marcellus Shale drilling operation in Amwell Township. A monitor at the site found the contamination in the groundwater supply Friday, nearly 2 months after a tear in the impoundment's 30-millimeter thick liner was discovered, said State Department of Environmental Protection spokesman John Poyster. We don't really know the extent of the groundwater contamination, Poyster said. But what do we learn from this? We learned 12,000 tons of soil has to be moved. This thing was leaking for 2 months before the supposed regulations and detection systems even knew it was happening. They don't even know how bad the leak is. This kind of thing goes on every day. How long do you think this can go on before people start to rebel? Before people start to say, we can't have this? Because do you think people are going to just have their water contaminated, their air contaminated, noise pollution? This is why you have protest movements all over the world and all over this country about fracking. But somehow when they're selling this to you, one of the points they never make, because they don't claim there's anything wrong, one of the points they never address is what are they going to do about all the people who don't like what they're doing? What are they going to do about that? What are they going to do as the outcry? Remember, I'm on the anti-fracking side. And we know for a fact that we've got reinforcements coming. We may be beleaguered and outnumbered now, but we know we've got reinforcements coming because the reinforcements are all the new people that the industry is alienating. This is the real story. More and more and more people are catching on to how deadly this industry is, and more voices are being raised against it. What is going to be the end game as the population rises up against fracking? And that's what's happening. And so the question isn't will people rise up? The question is, what is going to be the response to it? That number to call in again is 772-1290 here at WNBF, where we're doing a special anti-fracking edition of the Nobody Show. Hey, let me read you something else. This will illustrate what I'm trying to tell you. This is from the American Spectator, a conservative publication, June 10th of this year. And the folks at the American Spectator are trying to figure something out that doesn't quite mesh with their philosophy. Because remember, on a theoretical level, many conservatives and Republicans are committed to fracking because of all of the claims that are made. And they believe in it, and they're pro-business and whatever. And I got no objection to it if it was the real deal, and they believe in things that are the real deal. Unfortunately, it's not the real deal. So here, listen to this. Drilled here, drilled now has been a mainstay of Republican political rhetoric for quite some time, and with the near miraculous revolution in domestic energy production, it's no longer just a catchy slogan, which is why a sudden development last week in a nearly universally Republican area of one of America's most promiscuous oil-producing states has political observers gobsmacked and conservatives of several stripes pouring stiff drinks. On Thursday, June 5th, the St. Tammany Parish Council, representing the most prosperous and conservative of Louisiana's local governmental units, called counties everywhere else in America, voted unanimously in favor of a resolution to halt the very process that has set the country on a course for energy security. The council, which is overwhelmingly Republican, resolved Thursday to hire outside attorneys and pursue legal action in order to stop the state's Department of Natural Resources from granting a permit for Hellas Oil Company of New Orleans to drill an oil well in St. Tammany Parish. It's one of several major shale oil plays popping up around the country thanks to horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, which the politicians in St. Tammany, acting on orders from the angry mob stirred up by environmental groups, are now seeking to ban. This is a parish that voted for John McCain over Barack Obama by a 76-23 margin, and for Mitt Romney over Obama by a 75-23 margin. Obviously, the folks at the American Spectator just can't understand this phenomenon. Why is the most Republican county rebelling in this way? And they can only explain it because of this miracle, this wonderful fracking, right? They can't explain it at all, except it's a mob, an angry mob stirred up by environmental groups. But you know what? I know a lot of environmentalists. I know a ton of them. Some known, some unknown. People who care about the environment. I have never met an environmentalist who thought they could sway with a few words a conservative Republican group in a parish of Louisiana. I never met that person. Mostly, environmentalists wish they could get anyone to listen, wish they had some clout, wish they had more clout. The idea that all we got to do is say a few words and the most conservative Republicans in the country just go along with what we say. We just stir them up like we're a lynch mob, you know? And and we can just do that. To the most conservative Republicans in Louisiana, what kind of fantasy is that? How crazy do you have to be to believe that? So let's take a look at the real story. These are people who have put up with oil drilling, conventional drilling, for decades. These are people who by philosophy and orientation don't have any objection to fracking and would not have an objection to it, and who nobody can even imagine them having an objection to it. But why do they object to it? Because in reality it's really bad. It's not a philosophical point. In practice, fracking is a grotesque disaster. That's why you're having this rebellion. But what are people going to do? What are the powers that be going to do? What's going to happen when their plans go awry? What's going to happen as more and more people defect? That number to call in here again on the Nobody Show at WNBF is 759-8961, 759-8961. Let me read you another one of these, and there's a lot of them. This is from May 19th, 2014. 9 East Smithfield Township, this is from the Public Herald Archives. In Pennsylvania, this is talking about 9 East Smithfield Township natural gas leaseholders have banded together to fight a new permit from the State Department of Environmental Protection that allows more than 700,000 gallons of toxic waste to be stored in backyards for years. Driven with frustration by Chesapeake Energy and DEP's lack of communication to the township, a 9-member group of residents represented by spokesman Dick Stedge formed and filed an appeal to a WMGR 123 permit approved in March. The permit allows Chesapeake Energy to store 756,000 gallons of oil and gas liquid waste in tanks for 6 years on a tract of land owned by Lamb's Farm Storage. While the DEP classifies the permit as a processing and beneficial use of oil and gas waste, the group maintained that it's a deceptive name, adding Chesapeake has not fully disclosed the intended use of the facility. If the storage area is permitted for 6 years, said the group, the site will be in actuality a, quote, wastewater recycling facility in our backyards. What do we learn from this? We learn that this is a group of people who leased their land. They leased their land. These are the leaseholders. These are the people who went along with the oil and gas industry. And now they don't believe anything they're told, and they're taking legal action because they see the way it really is. Fracking is not the better mousetrap. Fracking is the worse mousetrap. And wherever it goes, there's trouble. But here we have it. See, this is the conundrum. This is the problem. They introduced this thing, and it's nothing but trouble everywhere it goes. Well, what are they going to do about that? What are they going to do? What's going to be the reaction from the powers that be to the growing opposition to fracking? We have a question here about will they let it into New York, and I hope I'm able to persuade a few people that that's a really bad idea. You don't want to wind up like these people who believed in it and now regret it. But what are they going to do? And like I said at the beginning, what's thinkable isn't true, and what's true is unthinkable. And here's where we have to get into reality, which is sad. If you want to talk about what really fits the facts, if you want to connect the dots, and you want to say what fits the facts, the industry story, or the anti-fracking dire warning story, let's go back a little when they usurped our rights in the dead of night and abrogated decades worth of environmental law so that fracking is not bound by the Clean Water Act, Safe Drinking Water Act, all kinds of the Hazardous Waste Act, and NEPA, which is the Superfund Act. When nobody knew what they were doing in 2005, they introduced the so-called Halliburton loophole, and just all that law was gone. Things people had fought for decades. Things that had been put into the law because of suffering that people had seen with polluted rivers and polluted streams and children getting sick. It all just disappeared. And it disappeared because they convened a panel in the EPA of 7 people, 5 of whom had direct ties to the industry, including an employee of the Natural Gas Institute or whatever it's called, and an employee of Halliburton. And they all said there's nothing to worry about based on no evidence, because there was no evidence at that time. And with that fig leaf, they shot it through Congress when nobody really knew what it was and nobody could even object. That now all of the laws people had fought for were going to be gone. I consider this an act of tyranny along with many others. But why did they do this? Why did they do it? And why are they to this day keeping the formula secret so that we don't know to this day all of the chemicals? We can't even test for all of the chemicals because we don't know what they are. Why is it that when Obama said 2 years ago or something in a State of the Union message, well, he was touting, we'll have 100 years of clean gas energy. Why did he also promise, but we'll get you? He threw a sop to the anti-fracking movement with this. We're going to go ahead with this, but we're going to get you the full disclosure of the chemicals, and then he never did it, like so many other things he promised that he doesn't do. Why couldn't he produce that? Why did they have to be exempted from the law? Well, you can accept the industry story, which is why there's so little reason to worry. Why do you even need a law? Right? Wouldn't everybody like that? Wouldn't every bank robber like that? Oh, there's nothing to worry about. Why bother to lock the vault? Why bother to make it a crime to steal from a bank? Who'd ever do that? So that's what the industry got. They got this law all of a sudden based on, mind you, an industry which has polluted and killed people all over the world. This is an industry with dirty hands. Anybody remember the Prince William Sound or the Gulf of Mexico, among many, many, many other things? They nonetheless said, why, we're so safe and nothing could ever go wrong. Okay, so do you believe that? That's what's thinkable, but it isn't true. It's not true that nothing can go wrong, because plenty of things have already gone wrong. So that wasn't the true story. But so what other story could possibly explain the fact that they got removed from the law? Well, this is really hard to talk about, because there's only one other possible story. And like I said, what's true is unthinkable. The only other possible explanation is they knew that fracking was deadly. They knew people wouldn't stand for it if they knew what was really going on. And they wanted to prolong as much as possible the period during which they could do it without being stopped. What other explanation could there be? They had this process, and all of a sudden, they like to say, we've been fracking for 60 years, but they weren't fracking like this for 60 years. It's one of the industry's many lies. They weren't using all these chemicals at this volume and at this pressure. This is really a permutation, yes, of an old technique, but it's a qualitatively different. It's a different technique, really. And if it was the same technique, why? Their story is it's the same technique for 60 years. A story which doesn't explain why all of a sudden they needed new legislation. Doesn't fit. Their story doesn't add up. All of a sudden, they needed this new legislation, and you have to believe it's because they knew what they were going to do was really, really bad. And so they used their clout, biggest industry in the world, and all their bought-off politicians, and the happy coincidence that the president and vice president at the time were both oil men. Halliburton had developed this process, and the powerful vice president at that time had been the president of Halliburton. So they used their connections, and they got the laws changed so that they were not liable to the laws. That number to call in again is 607-772-1290 here at WNBF. And they knew it was bad, and they got it exempted from the law. And what does that mean? What that means is that they knew they were going to be killing people, and they didn't care. And what they cared about was the money they thought they would make. They didn't care about democracy. They didn't care about the American people. As I've told you before, during the same time Halliburton was developing this process, they sold nuclear bomb triggers to Iran. They were fined $3.8, $3.2, whatever it was, $1 million for it, because nobody really gets punished if they're in a corporate world. These are the great patriots at Halliburton selling nuclear weapons triggers to Iran, dual-use product, but something that was illegal to send to Iran, and they did it anyway. That's who started fracking. That's who was a major player. And they went there in 2005, and they decided that the laws of the American people were not good enough for them, or too good for them, I should say. So they had to be torn up. And everything was going to have to be a secret so nobody would know about it. What did they know? They knew how bad it was, and they were prepared to kill. You know, it sounds terrible to say it, but there's no other conclusion you can draw. These are people ready to kill the American people and destroy America. That's their game. That's who they are. So the point of that is that given that's where they started, it's hard to believe they're going to go away as the evidence mounts against them and as people don't want them. They're still fighting everywhere to have less regulation, to cripple the states. They lost this race into Dryden and Middletown cases, about home rule in New York. Well, I'm glad we have home rule in New York. We have to keep them out of the state altogether, but they fought home rule everywhere. They fought it in Pennsylvania. They have fought the most common sense regulations everywhere. They're still fighting everywhere for the right to do this thing, which clearly is not what they said it was. And as the opposition grows, as the evidence that they're poisoning people grows, what are they going to do? These are people who said right from the get-go, we'll sell nuclear weapon triggers to Iran and we'll poison the American people and we don't care, just so we make money. That's who they are. That's who the Joint Landowners Committee is in New York. That's who all of these people are. All of the advocates for fracking are people who say, we want to make money at your expense. That's what it is. Some of them may be naive. Some of them may have stupid global ideas like, oh, we'll be players and we'll do this and we won't be dependent in Europe on Russian gas or something, and they don't really stop to think that it's poisoning Americans. But you can't say that about the industry. The industry must have known it was poison. Because if they really had, they would not, if they had any good answer with all this rising tide of opposition, they'd give you the answer. They would tell you what it is. They'd say it's harmless. They can't do it because it's not true. That's why I started this show off by saying we're never going to hear from anyone in the industry who's going to have anything to say because they got nothing. And no one I've had their shills call in and they've had nothing. Just like I said, there is nothing to support fracking. Can't be done. So what are they going to do? What really is going to happen? Well, now you know. Let me I wish I had good news about this. But we're going to get into some of the darker parts of this. But true. But we're going to first take a break for some more advertisements. Which I will read to you, and then we'll come back and we'll get into some of the most difficult stuff that we're going to get into. And so the number to call in here on the Nobody Show on WNBF is 772-607-772-1290.
Hi, my name is Michael. The host of the radio show you are listening to now is my father, but please, don't hold that against me. I'm a respectable businessman. My wife and I founded greenscreenpromos.com. We specialize in designing sustainable plans that help you lessen the environmental impact of your advertising and promotions, or just make mementos for your celebrations that are earth-friendly. No, we can't help you with your crazy uncle, but here at Green Screen Promos, we can help you keep him from screwing up the planet. Oh, I think I'm sounding like my dad. That's greenscreenpromos.com.
Okay, I'll read you some more ads. That's my son's ad. I strongly encourage anybody who wants to patronize his business, Green Screen Promos, to do so. This portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by Glendale Farm Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice. The ingredients of Glendale Farm Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice, as listed on the label, are New York Certified Organically Grown Concord, Catawba, Delaware, and Cayuga grapes. You'll note that frack water isn't on that list, and the folks at Glendale Farm Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice would like to keep it that way. That's Glendale Farm Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice, available at a natural food store near you. This portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by West Hill Graphics, specializing in graphic design, where we make you look great in print and on the web. We also care for many rescue farm animals, and we sure don't want to see a frack rig destroy our lives. That's West Hill Graphics at westhillgraphics.com. And this portion of the Nobody Show is brought to you by Oneida and Eagle Crest Vineyards, growing grapes for over 140 years on pristine Hemlock Lake, a shining example of proper stewardship of the land and water. That's Oneida and Eagle Crest Vineyards, makers of Oneida and Eagle Crest Pure Grape Finger Lakes wines, available at purewineonline.com. And this portion of the Nobody Show is brought to you by Home Green Home, offering organic mattresses and green lifestyle goods at 215 The Commons in Ithaca. And last, but of course not least, let me mention Pompous Ass Winery on the west shore of Seneca Lake, which has supported this show and just won't give me any copy for an ad, but I always want to mention them because they're nice folks like all of my advertisers. Well, all right, what are they going to do as there is this rising tide of opposition to fracking? What are they going to do? Well, the first thing they're going to do is destroy our ability to object. That's what they're actually going to do. That's their plan. That's not, this is not paranoid or alarmist or the sky is falling. This is the actual truth. Horrible as it may be. Again, the numbers to call in here at WNBF are 772-1290. Okay, this is Article C. This is the leaked draft of the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, which is currently being negotiated along with a Trans-Pacific Partnership, which would open up all of the eastern nations to fracked gas so we can export it there. And they're building export terminals, and while they say it's going to be cheap, an American resource, they're really planning on exporting it, and the price will go up. This we know because there's fights over all these export licenses and fights over the terminals they want to build, and so there's nothing mysterious. And they may not include this section in the Transatlantic Free Trade Agreement, but we do know it was in a draft because it's been a leaked draft which has been seen now by the press. And this is what it says in Section C, Article C. Quote, exports of energy goods to the other party meaning from one signatory of this treaty to another, us and the European powers, exports of energy goods to the other party shall be deemed automatically to comply with any conditions and tests foreseen in the parties' respective legislation for the granting of export licenses. Let me read that again. Exports of energy goods to the other party shall be deemed automatically to comply with any conditions and tests foreseen in the parties' respective legislation for the granting of export licenses. So what that means is they are going to override with an international treaty the sovereign decisions of the people of the United States, plain and simple. Maybe this won't get in that draft, in the final draft, but this is what they're proposing to do. They're proposing to have an international treaty, a binding treaty on the United States, which says that no matter any tests foreseen in our legislation, meaning environmental tests, tests about danger of things, meaning we can't have that. Meaning if somebody wants our gas, we have to export it to them, and it doesn't matter anything else that our nation has decided upon. Doesn't matter if the people of New York State have said we want the gas companies out. It doesn't matter if they put in regulations in Pennsylvania, because you have to export it, and it's automatically deemed to comply with any, that's the word, any conditions and tests foreseen in the parties' respective legislation for the granting of export licenses. This is the move they're trying to make, just like they made a move with Article 13 in Pennsylvania. If you don't know what it is, they made a move in Pennsylvania where they just canceled home rule, the same thing we fought for in New York. And the people of Pennsylvania woke up one day in the legislature and passed a rule that you can't zone fracking out. You have no say in it anymore. You thought you had a say in it in Pittsburgh or, Williamsport or any place else, but you don't actually have a say in it because the gas companies lobbied and they got a law passed, and presto, chango, you have no say anymore in what happens in your own neighborhood. If your own water is at risk of pollution, if your children are at risk, you have no more say in it. And that was struck down by the court, but then the gas industry is appealing. That's what the gas industry does. This is fact, not fiction. They try to take the sovereignty of the people away from them. They try to take our power as citizens of the United States away from us to decide our own destiny. And that is what a democracy is a place where the people can decide their own destiny. And now they're trying to do it through a treaty. Override our state laws. Now they're going to override our state laws a different direction. Instead of lobbying to have absurd laws passed, they're going to have press for a treaty. And then we'll find out in the treaty we've signed, all of our rights are gone because they signed a treaty and we had no say in it. And we didn't know about it. Those numbers to call in again, or that number to call in again, is 607-772-1290 here on a special anti-fracking edition of the Nobody Show, where we're asking the question, what's going to happen as push comes to shove and the opposition rises? Again, it's 607-772-1290 is the number to call in. We have Bob from Binghamton. Welcome to the show, Bob.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for taking my call.
Well, I thank you for calling.
I'm kind of on the fence with the whole fracking thing, and I think my feeling is we need energy independence from despots such as Venezuela and the Gulf countries and African countries that
okay.
They're our enemies. They're not our friends.
Let me stop you there, Bob. I'll let you make more points, but let me just stop you on that one point, okay?
Yeah.
What makes you think we're going to get that out of fracking?
Well, we have become, for the first time since 1972, we are now becoming an oil exporter for the first time since 1972.
Right, but Bob, if we're exporting it, right now, I mean, this is just a fact, we're limited in how much we can export because they don't have all of the export terminals they want and they don't have all the pipelines they want, and that's why they're trying to build them, right?
Well, eventually they'll get built, but in the short term, my feeling is I'm not a pro-fracking person, but I think in the short term, it's a Band-Aid until we develop technology that can kind of bring us to a independence from fossil fuels. But in the short term, I think it's a good thing for maybe the next 5 or 10 years until we develop the science to develop energy from something that will be able to heat people's homes with their gas boilers and their furnaces and buildings and millions of buildings in Canada and the United States where we need heat.
Okay,
and in the short term, that's kind of what we're going to have to do. I think, long term we've got to think of something to come up with to replace the heating plants in millions of homes and buildings and colleges and schools all over North America and Canada and the U.S. But in the short term, we need the gas, we need the energy. keep our country going.
Okay, Bob, let's just, first of all, I mean, it's interesting to hear what you have to say, because what you're saying is not what anybody else says. So, I mean, that's fine. That makes you a real caller, because you're not a parrot for the industry. So I appreciate that. And what the industry says is, 100-year supply of clean energy, bridge to this and all, bridge to the future. Well, you're saying you'll settle for 5 or 10 years, okay? That's not what the industry is promising, but you're saying that you personally will take 5 or 10 years, we get out of it, even if it's not the greatest thing. At what cost are you prepared to do that, Bob?
Well, I think, in the meantime, you've got millions of homes in the U.S. and Canada, the northern part of the United States, that needs heat.
Sure, nobody disputes that.
That can convert.
Nobody disputes that, but are you willing to pay the price of poisoning the air and water for 5 or 10 years of energy, which could be gotten some other way?
Well, in the short term, we don't have a choice.
Sure we do. Sure we do. They always say that we don't have a choice, but I've never seen it. Never seen it. They've never put forward the actual breakdown of why we have no choice. If we invested billions of dollars in insulating homes, in solar power, taking the pressure off the grid, needing less energy because of better insulation, having more fuel-efficient cars, I'll bet you that at the end of the day, we are just as effective in terms of solving our energy needs as we will be by fracking.
Well, I think all those things that you just mentioned are things that we do in conjunction with trying to find a new science to be able to heat people's homes with the current furnaces and boilers and the apparatus that they have throughout, the northern part of the U.S. and Canada and Europe, that, if they come up with something that would be great, the average person can't afford to put solar panels on their roof, and some people can't afford.
Sure, but we could subsidize it. In fact, New York has a very good program for that called NYSERDA, and I encourage people to check that out. And if the government wanted to encourage that, they could. But again, here's my question, Bob.
I don't mean to interrupt you, but construction, I'm in the construction industry, and I know about solar arrays. I know what the cost is, et cetera, and it's not a viable solution.
Yeah, it is, Bob. Have you ever heard? Have you ever heard of a feed-in tariff?
I have not.
A feed-in tariff has to do with if you have a solar panel on your house and you have extra energy, you can feed it into the grid. And then there's a question about how much money you should get back for it. And the industry argues, well, you should get the wholesale rate back. And the homeowners say, no, you should just backwards meter my thing. You're charging me a retail rate. You should just, if I'm giving you the power, you should take it off. You can have a philosophical disagreement about that. But in countries and in places where they have the feed-in tariff set at the higher rate, all of a sudden, solar facilities get put in like crazy because it's a cottage industry. People can make money and they know they'll have a return. They can get their energy bills reduced. And if you want to encourage solar and make it pay for itself, you do that. And the industry fights that.
Not disagreeing with you with that. But if your home is using heating oil and natural gas and you've got a forced hot air boiler or forced hot air furnace, you can't convert to solar with that apparatus in your home.
No, but you can do a lot of things. Remember, there is oil without fracking, and there is stuff in the world. You can insulate better. You can when everything you do by solar takes pressure off the grid, some of that stuff is powered by other fuels, and that means there's more capacity left. But anyway, I haven't got time. I got another caller, and I want to thank you, Bob, very much for the call.
One thing I believe, I think they should limit this to 5 or 10 years, and in 5 years revisit it all and look at it again in 5 years. That's my opinion.
Okay, well, my opinion is we should have a moratorium for 5 or 10 years and see how safe it is before we risk our health on what's only a very temporary gain. But I thank you for your opinion, Bob. Okay, the number to call in again is 772-1290. We have Vera from Brackney, PA on the line. Hi, Vera.
Yes, hi, Jeremy.
Well, it's very good to talk to you, Vera.
I'm just happy to call. I'm listening to Bob's response too. Before we had fracking, we have had other forms of energy and fuel that we've used. So it's not like we actually have a lack of energy in the United States that we have to turn to fracking, which right now in my county, Susquehanna County, it has affected numerous families. We have water contamination, we have air contamination, we have health impacts, and we have all of that just in this county, besides the other dozens of counties that are being fracked right now in Pennsylvania, and then besides the other states across the United States. So this is something that is not to be risked, it's not to be handled lightly, and if we're willing to risk our water and air, then that's another question. But we need not to risk these things for energy. And I find that Bob, who called, obviously doesn't maybe know about the damage. He needs to come here and visit the families. And I do citizen tours every week, and I show people the families, show the things that the industry is hiding. The industry is not willing to let the world know, and the industry is denying that it exists.
Well, of course, we're on the same side, and I totally agree with you. And I think that, but I think Bob is a real person, unlike some of the callers we've had, and he has these feelings. You're right; he should know more about the negative effects. But what I would say is, if they're going to claim, anyone's going to claim, that we can do this for 5 or 10 years and we have no other alternative, I want to see the proof that we have no other alternative.
That's right. I want to see the proof. And then I want to say to Bob and everybody else, please do not risk me and my family and all the other families in this county so that you can have the fuel that you think is okay for 5 years. Do not risk us. We are being risked. We are being harmed. And come out here and see us and meet us. And then tell me that you are willing to do this. Are you willing to do it for your family, for your children, your grandchildren? So if you're not, then please do not risk all of us throughout all of Pennsylvania now, where about 40 counties are being fracked.
Well, I, of course, agree with you completely, and I think, in all honesty, I think people of Bob's persuasion really don't understand how bad it is. That's all I can conclude.
But they're not willing to even find out. I meet them all the time.
No, I'm not going to say that about Bob. I think Bob might be, but I mean, a lot of the people who are pushing it are not willing to find out because they stand to profit from it.
Well, let Bob know that he can call the station back again, or he can contact me, Vera Scroggins, at 607-237-9685, if he really would like to know and not just hear the industry hype, and come and meet us and see if he wants his family to go through what all a bunch of neighbors of mine are going through at this point. All kinds of people are going through.
All right, Vera, I thank you for that. You want to give out your phone number one more time if you really want this? 607-237-9685. If you want to come, and I can show you the people, show you the harm that I've been showing for the past 5 years, and we can show you the documents, you can meet the people, see what they're going through, go right into their homes, and see how they're living for the past 5 years and what they're living next to, and see if this is what you would like for yourself and your neighbors. Okay, thank you very much for the call, Vera.
Thank you.
All right, let me read you a couple of things. We're almost out of time, but I want to kind of get to the punchline here. This is somebody commenting on something called the Minerva Initiative. This is an article in the Guardian newspaper, which is British. A lot of the best reporting about America is in British newspapers because, well, we have a corporate press, whatever. Our press isn't as good as it could be. Let's put it that way. And the Minerva Initiative is a Pentagon initiative. And it's to find ways to influence protest groups. And according to Professor David Price, a cultural anthropologist at St. Martin's University in Washington, D.C., and author of Weaponizing Anthropology, one war game that is in the Minerva Initiative, one war game they're playing involved environmental activists protesting pollution from a coal-fired plant near Missouri, some of whom were members of the well-known environmental NGO Sierra Club. Participants were tasked to identify those who were problem solvers and those who were problem causers, and the rest of the population, whom would be the target of the information operations, to move their center of gravity toward that set of viewpoints and values which was the desired end state of the military strategy. Okay? Problem solvers and problem causers as defined by people with a particular objective, and you're a problem causer if you get in their way. And the Pentagon is already preparing and is wargaming, interfering with citizens' environmental groups. You all heard about NSA spying and how widespread and how unbelievable it is. Well, they're preparing to interfere with citizen groups. That's what they're wargaming. And how to get people, what are they going to do to get the center of gravity to go the way they want to? But this isn't even the industry anymore. This isn't like it's the Republican Party anymore, or the Democrats, or the president. This is the Pentagon. This is now in the war-making department of the United States government. How we're going to control the populace. And you think that they're going to stop after it's gotten to the point where they've abrogated the laws so there's no environmental protections anymore? After they've fought tooth and nail, they don't care who they kill? And now they're going to start wargaming how to influence domestic groups and target the people who are the troublemakers who don't go along with it? What does that portend? Ask yourself that. Listen, anybody out there who wants to get in touch with me after the show, send me a message. You can at contactnobody@yahoo.com. Contactnobody@yahoo.com. This show and the other shows will be archived at www.nofrackalmanac.com. nofrackalmanac.com. People, the thing I'm trying to tell you is the end game of this isn't just about pollution, it's about tyranny. They're not going to let us protest. They don't want us to know what's going on, and they don't want us to be able to protest what's going on, and they don't want to be able to have a legal structure that will let us, and that's all proven to be true. And we've got to fight them, and you got to believe that we can, because as I always say, paraphrasing Ben Gurion, if you don't believe in miracles, you're not a realist. We got to get realistic about fracking. I'm Nobody. Good night.
This is Binghamton's news leader. News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton.